God bless you. This is the God Family and Country Radio Show, and I'm Pastor Kurt. In studio with me is Pat Coyle, and this is a special edition of what we're doing for the God Family Country Radio Show. We're talking about uh, we're talking about Iran, we're talking about the United States, we're talking about Israel, and we're talking about how far back this goes biblically. The very war that we're seeing take place was actually predicted in the Bible and how it would take place. And we are going to take you through a little bit of history so that you have the ability to understand how Shiites, Sunni kind of came into play. Specifically, we'll be talking about the Shiites because that's the radicalized Islam of what we see today. And we're going to be taking you through a little bit of history on how the United States has played a role in all of these and give you some time periods so that you'll have a brief history about what's really going on and what God has planned. Pat, you and I've talked about it many times. God's not doing anything different. He's done the same thing throughout history, right?
God has had a plan that precedes the creation of the planet.
Of course.
God didn't do anything. In fact, Jesus told of a parable. Well, not a parable, but he said, what builder starts to lay a foundation
Mm-hmm.
without first deciding if he has enough to finish it?
Yeah.
He said, everybody will see that he started and is not able to finish it. Now,
Right.
if Jesus made that comment about men as they build little towers and houses and things like that, do you think that the architect of the universe started just building stuff to see, well, let's see how this turns out?
Right.
In other words, he had already laid the plans in advance. And what we could say is this all boils down to a single, Jesus and all of the prophets talked about a kingdom yet to come. In other words, from the Garden of Eden,
Mm-hmm.
he knew from the Garden of Eden that this was just the starting point. It was not the ending point.
Right.
He wasn't fixing something broken.
Mm-hmm.
He was creating something new. And what he was doing is creating from man and all mankind. He was going to create a kingdom for his son, but it would not be on this planet because remember, he said, in fact, in Psalms, he said, you create the heavens and earth, but you will replace them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always God's intention is this world that we see, and he's done that before. We can see the flood.
Right.
We can see where God does catastrophic things. But when we're talking in this particular arena, why we were talking about
Well,
this, we were talking about
he
Iran.
does tell us in Isaiah, he says, I create peace and I create calamities.
Yeah, he goes, I did light. In other words, it all belongs to me, and I am doing things
Right.
that I have decreed that happen. I am following a very tight plan, and nothing is going to stop me, and nothing's going to change.
Right.
And so the reality that that we look at is all we see are the effects. We are people. We don't know exactly the details that God is working out, but we do know the things that God has revealed to us
Mm-hmm.
are to us and our children, for generations to
Right.
come. And there are some things that God has reserved for himself.
That's correct.
And we can kind of see little evidences of that, with when Peter was talking to Jesus after the resurrection and said, "Hey, what about John over there? What is that to you?
Yeah.
If I want him to remain until I return, that's none of your business.
Right.
You follow me." And so there are things that God has for us individually, and then the Scripture. And I'm big on 1 Corinthians 4:6. Do not go beyond what I have written
Well,
down.
this is the big problem. We talk about false prophets, but we're going to get, we'll get to some of that stuff in the process here of maybe some of the things that you're hearing out there today. But we're going to stay truthful to God's word, and we're going to get into the just a little bit of the history. And so, Pat,
history is already written, so that makes it easy for us.
Well, but from our standpoint is what I'm talking about. The history of where we saw uh, Islam, uh, and where the Shiites began. Because yeah, I could take you. We could take you all the way back to the garden here, folks. But we're not going to do that.
There's a lot of information.
There's a lot out there, and
Yeah.
someday we will go back and do that. But we're going to start
It's like
around.
trying to give a glass of water with a fire hose. There's just too much, too fast.
That's
It's
exactly
just
right.
not going to happen. So
And-
we want to
and
focus it. And
I'm going to like shorten you up a little bit because
please,
we've got to. I want us to finish this. I
Yeah.
want us to get this in this 2-hour show because I believe there's so much great information out there for people that you're going to learn, that understanding really the role that Iran plays, really Persia, the Persian people, of what they play from a biblical standpoint,
that's
because it's a powerful, powerful thing to look at.
we are coming up. Jesus called this the last days. Not it was the last days when
It's been the last days when he died on the cross.
That's exactly right. He closed out one chapter.
Right.
And he began another chapter. But then he tells us that there is going to come a close of the chapter that we're now in. We are in what we would say is the age of the Gentiles, the age of
Still there.
And we are still there.
It began in Babylon, right?
Well, I would say it's this. In Babylon, that created the Gentile nations. If you don't want me, I don't want you.
Right.
You could almost say, and I think he called it the Great Divorce.
Yeah.
And so he scattered. The nations didn't want to scatter anymore. They wanted
correct.
to make one city, and they wanted one king. They wanted
Right.
one leader, one God.
But this came under Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel's a great place for you to go and look at.
Wait a minute. Tower of Babel predates all of that.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I'm talking about the actual age of the Gentile.
Well,
that really began at Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar.
I would say it would go like this. All people, remember all of those nations in Genesis chapter 11, the table of nations.
Right.
They were all descendants of Noah and his sons.
Yes.
They had all been saved through the ark. They all knew the stories, but they'd also, since that period of time, started taking on new gods, new ways of thinking.
Right.
We talk about Nimrod. He becomes like a precursor.
Right. Well, this is where paganism was born.
Absolutely.
Right.
In fact, Babylon was one of his first cities.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, when we're looking in Revelation, there's two major cities, Jerusalem and Babylon. Those
Mm-hmm.
are the two cities that we are that literally are coming at loggerheads with one another.
Right.
But why we're talking today about a very specific, a tiny microscopic, if you think, segment is because it's in the news today. People are asking questions. Does this have prophetic significance? Is this a mile marker, or is this just another billboard?
Right.
Should I be paying attention, or is there something more or less to this? I would suggest that the people, since we're talking about Iran, and that's what we're talking about for this particular
Mm-hmm.
show, is focusing on one people, one country
Mm-hmm.
that has a very rich history that literally goes back to that Tower of Babel.
That's
so
correct.
to speak. But what we want to talk about, what's going on today, what is God doing in the world? Because he does in Matthew 24, and we were talking about this a little bit
That's
before,
true.
and before we hit a break, we want to just
Mm-hmm.
kind of say, hey, what we're attempting to do is to kind of rein in some of these cats, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
because what is going on is as significant as what went on in 1979 when they changed regimes forcibly.
Yes.
And instituted a highly structured, strict, which actually set both the Islamic world. It's not the first time Islam has fought Islam. That, as if you think about
Right.
it, Ishmael was against everyone, and everyone was against Ishmael.
Yeah, there's two sects of Islam,
Yeah.
Shia and Sunni. And Sunni a great example of Sunnis would be those that are from Saudi Arabia, those areas. I guess, if I was going to really condense it down and cheapen it a little bit, it would be the idea of Sunnis being Islam light. whereas a Shiite would be to the book and even going a little beyond the book well, I wouldn't say that because it calls for exactly what the Shiites are doing, which was the destruction. And we always need to understand what does the word Islam mean. The word Islam means to submit, and if you don't submit, you are to be killed. That's the truth, and that's what the Quran calls for.
What we do want to focus on is that there is a change occurring. Jesus said in Matthew 24.
We got to take a break.
In fact, when we get, we'll do that right now.
We'll take that break. God bless you. We'll be right back. God bless you. God Family Country Radio Show. I'm Pastor Kurt. In studio with me is Pat Coyle. We're talking about the events that took place, started a week ago Saturday. We woke up to this. I was up about 4 o'clock in the morning and heard the first light of it had really come about 1:30 in the morning about the war taking place with Israel and the United States attacking Iran. And we're talking about really the incredible prophetic look of what God has done. And we're going to start with that history, right, Pat?
Yeah. In fact, we've been attacking Iran. If you think about this, not the first time that we woke up and found out we were in war. We were in war. We had Iraq. Iraq and Iran have been fighting. The realities are is that I think we can get an idea that a better way to look at this is if we start rolling back the clock. We can roll this clock all the way back, like I said, to Babel.
I think if we could go back that far, yes. I don't want us to do that.
No.
Let's start around the 1500s. This is where
the golden
Islam
age
became radicalized.
They call it the golden age of Islam.
Yeah, right.
And it was an empire, the Safavid empire, and I think I butchered that. How Iran became Shiite because there was a break, and the break came from the death of Muhammad and who's following who.
Right.
I'm following this guy. I'm following his son. He didn't leave really clear instructions in that respect.
Right.
But one of the things about that is that it began to set up for the entire region an idea. In fact, that particular region, quite frankly, was rather tolerant to Christians. Excuse me for the cough. We're all getting over something lately. But one of the things that, because it does have tie-ins to today, they had done a lot. In fact, it predated the Reformation.
By about 70 years, 75 years, somewhere around there.
What's interesting is printing, which began with Gutenberg's press during the Reformation, which printed the Bible. Iran, this empire, got another press and started printing its own Quran. Up until both of those, the only way you got copies of your writings was if somebody wrote them down.
Right.
Which created a problem in Islam. In fact, one of the things today Islam has to contend with is its own writings are under scrutiny and serious doubts by their own scholars that we have no idea about whether or not Muhammad ever said these things.
Well, because the difference between it had been...
They didn't have a writings for a couple of 100 years, 300 years after.
Yeah, and we hear people talk about, well, it was the same way for the Bible. No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It was not the same thing. We have the original manuscripts. We know what it was.
I would caution you. We do not have the autographs.
No.
We have the earliest. People were writing scripture literally from the very beginning. They were making copies from the beginning. That's how the early.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is we know where we have our information from.
We have so much information.
And of course, 1947
with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
With the Dead Sea Scrolls, just took everything that we already knew
back 1,000 years
and confirmed it.
Yeah, and one of the things that one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is because Islam is in a crisis right now. Nobody talks about it.
Right.
Its crisis is because as you begin to look at their writings, that both parties, Shiite and Sunnite, they're all claiming that. In fact, right now there is not one Quran. There
Oh
are
no,
at
there are.
least there are now. It's not. It's. I think it's around 30 or 40 that are actually circulating right now all throughout Africa, the
a-
Middle East, and
and
all
different,
that.
all
And they're
different.
all different. Not in some cases minor, in some cases major, but the very they don't. They had a problem back around the 700s.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, not 700s, but a little bit later than that. When one of the caliphates came in and he heard people talking and saying these are the words of Muhammad, and he didn't recognize those words, and he got all their writings together and said, we need to sift through these and see if we can find out
Hmm.
what's this. They literally went through a purge in which they literally destroyed tens of thousands of works. They burned them, destroyed them. No Islamic scholar today can say that he has the words of Muhammad. They don't know
Right.
because they can't, because that was made by a single person, a single decision. And so what flowed out from there and flowed out from those regions are these things. So what people talk about, the Bible and the Quran are two completely different books,
Well,
compiled differently.
what they refer to as Allah, their God, doesn't reflect anything with regards to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Now, what we want to do is to kind of try to bring this up to date real quick because be, Islam has been going as a warlike tribe that basically almost swallowed the it almost swallowed all of Europe.
Hmm.
But God has been working a plan from the very beginning. All of those things. What did Jesus say in Matthew 24? There'll be wars and rumors of wars, but take heed that you're not concerned. These things must happen.
Right.
God has been working things, and he's just like he's working this week, and he'll work
And he
next week.
said he said immediately after that, he says there will be false prophets
Yeah, and
and false teachers that will come. And my point for
Muhammad
bringing
was
that
one of
up,
them.
Muhammad was definitely one of them. Any religion that is not of God, of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to be very honest with you,
There's only one God.
there's only one God, and there only has been one God, and there's really only one religion if you consider it to be Judaism as an example. Christians, and I'm talking about those that truly follow Christ, it's not a religion. It is a faith believing, knowing for certain we are followers of Christ Himself. We get kind of bunched in with all of these other different religions. But let me say this about Islam: Islam, as well as all other false religions, Mormonism, the list, Latter Day
They're all
Saints,
followers of
they're,
a man, of a
they're
person.
that's
Everybody's
correct,
following somebody.
which makes them the a religion of Satan. Now, that may seem strange to you, that may bother some of you, but you need to understand very clearly that this is a world of good and evil, and the king that sits or in control of this earth today is Satan himself. This is his kingdom for this time. It's coming to an end very quickly, but he's a liar and he's a murderer. And the fact that he's a liar and a murderer, he's doing everything he can to deceive and to understand that the people of Islam have been deceived. They are following a false religion. Okay.
And
That sets up for where you're going next.
one of the things that we are trying to do again is when we can talk about uh, false religions, that's a series of shows onto itself.
Of course. Well, we've spent time on that on other shows. They can go
Absolutely.
back on Spotify and look and see.
Yet when people are asking now about Iran, does this have any? What is the significance of this? So let's kind of Iran has significance. It was originally Iran is a relatively new, in the scheme of things as a word to describe a
early
region or a people.
early 1930s, they changed it from Persia to Iran.
Persians is what it's been commonly known for millennia.
Right.
And it's even goes back in, if you want to go into the people in the Bible, you would say that they came from Elam.
Yes.
And so you can read there, and there was a land that was allocated for them. God had allocated land for them.
Which is the land that they
They
possess.
possess now, and so that region was always determined that it would be settled.
Right.
And they just as they played a part in the formation and the upbringing of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
God used them mightily to both punish them and provide for them and protect them as
Mm-hmm.
well too. In fact, a couple of interesting things about that is, Cyrus was from Persia.
Right.
If you think about after when Daniel, the statue, God said, I've broken all, that he was in captivity. He said, you want to know what is the head of gold?
Mm-hmm.
That was Nebuchadnezzar,
Right.
who was Persian.
Right.
He said, but they will have that's the gold, but it will go on and it will go on to, then you'll have the Greeks and then the Romans and then then it becomes a mutt.
Well, you know how we talk about how God's not doing anything different. In other words, the situation may be, societies may be different. However, the very theme of what he's doing is what we're talking about is the same throughout history. And it's interesting that you mentioned Cyrus because so many of the Jewish people believe that Donald Trump is today's Cyrus.
It's an interesting tie-in in that. Abraham was born in Iraq.
Yes. Yeah.
That
in
that's right. And Noah's descendants, Elam, Aram, there's a Mesopotamian connection right there.
Right.
So God has been working in this region.
What can we let's just jump forward to the birth of Christ.
The
Magi themselves were Persian.
The Magi's were not even Jews. They were Zoroastrian.
Yes.
And now Zoroastrian had an interesting thing.
Now that goes way, way back.
They had an idea there is only one God, and there is a judgment, and there is a heaven, and then there is a hell. There were many faith belief systems that didn't have all of those things, but Zoroastrianism had one of them.
Yeah.
And yet they knew they could see the stars, they could see the time. In fact, when they came to Jerusalem, it's like the switch was going off. We've come to worship your king. What do you mean, our king? We're not looking for. Yes, you are. I saw his star. And that Daniel had passed on that information to the Magi through the Magi, which were from that region of that period of time. So whenever you have your Christmas play and you see the three wise men, you're looking at three Iranians.
Yeah.
And so, and even afterwards at Pentecost.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Pentecost, they said, hey, Parthians and Medes, we hear them in our own native language. When God had opened the door for the time of the Gentiles, he opened the door wide to everyone.
Right.
And those people, they went home back to Persia, back to Iran, if you will, before it was pre-Iran, and began bringing the gospel there. There were Christians all throughout that region for hundreds of years. They proliferated.
Still there today.
And
the estimates are today, roughly, about 3.5 million Christians that risk their lives every single day to go to an underground Bible study and to not be revealed who they are so that they can continue to pass on the word of God to others.
What's fascinating is that Iran, or that region, I should say, was relatively tolerant to Christians. Iran had other problems. They had the Mongols.
Right.
And it wasn't until the Mongols decided they would become Islamic. Up until that region, it was pretty much, you can worship whoever you want to worship, and we'll let you. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, it became problems usually with the same reasons. Any
Hmm.
resources, always played a part in that.
Right.
But in fact, Muhammad may have gotten all of his information from a heretic Christian who was told to leave,
Right.
you know. So Islam has a direct, connotation. There, there wouldn't be an Islam if there wasn't a Christ.
That's right.
But rolling that forward, because people want to know what in fact, when we coming up to the break, we want to kind of fast forward to after World War II.
Yeah, let's do that because we gave you a little brief history so you could see some things. There's so much more.
It is,
but we wanted to get as much as we could covered in this 2 hours for you, that it might be a real blessing so you have a better understanding of what it is God is doing. We'll take this break. We'll be right back. God bless you, God Family Country Radio Show. And I'm Pastor Kurt. In studio with me is Pat Coyle. We've been talking about Iran. We talked a little bit about the history. Of course, we could take you all the way back again to the
yeah.
garden on this. We took it from about 1500 AD, how the Shiite came into a position. And we've been talking about all this kind of stuff. But, Pat, you have to ask yourself a question, and I think people should. When we've seen that, Iran, what they used to be prior to the takeover of the Islamic regime, and the westernization of all of those things, and then what they've been under since
Yeah.
Islam, why is it that God all of a sudden has sort of taken the shackles off the Iranian people under Islam at this time?
Well, let's be clear. Iran has been under the shackles of Islam since the very beginning.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But since 1979, with the taking over with the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, a very strict religious, where the religious,
A radical shift.
it was, we are no longer going to let you do what you have done. You are not going to go that direction.
You're under our control. Again, it is to submit or be destroyed.
There are parallels in the Christian church with the rise of the Roman Catholic Church.
Oh, you could, go back. Yeah, go back to.
In other words, they believed God had given them the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and they were taking whatever they bind on earth gets bound in heaven. So they're going to take the opportunity to start, claiming ground for God. In fact, that's how Roman Catholicism spread and its mission spread.
Correct.
Basically, Islam took the same playbook.
Mm-hmm.
They came along much later, about 300 years after Constantine
Mm-hmm.
began, and they showed the world what fast expansion actually looks like,
Right.
almost swallowing Christianity. But God has allowed both of those things to occur. But, one of the things where we're at right now, one of the things I really found interesting, it's not just what's going on, what's going on in the entire Islamic world. And you actually can start that the clock itself back around we sing in the, if you're a Marine, the shores of Tripoli.
Yes.
From the beginning of
That
our
goes
country
to Jones.
In fact, they were the Americans, First Navy of the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Was wondering why these people in Tripoli were attacking our ships,
Yeah.
when we did nothing to attack them, and they were told, our God commands us to attack you.
Right.
And they said, oh, really?
What the heck is this?
Let's show your God that's not a good idea.
Right.
And we did. But then again, we keep moving forward in history. These battles, these fights that men keep having, and most specifically in this region, really came after World War II. World War I, but after World War II,
Mm-hmm.
there's a number of significant events that really put this into perspective. We were talking before the show, the absolute, prominence of oil,
Yeah, sure.
because prior to the 1900s, it wasn't oil that was running the world.
Right.
We were still steam, and we were in an industrial revolution, but war has a way of accelerating things, doesn't it?
Yes.
And when World War One came, and we developed, aircraft, and we developed tanks, and we developed powered equipment, and we needed petroleum like we never needed it before.
Hmm.
And then, literally following on the war that was supposed to end all wars, really just triggered the second war, and that's when the desire, the need, the addiction, if you will, for oil on a global basis now.
Sure.
Aircraft got faster, trains got faster, cars got everything required more and more. And what had God placed underneath the feet of the entire Middle East is an ocean of oil
Of
that
course.
seeped up to that was even in the Tower of Babel day. Oil
Even
played a point.
even off the coast of the Mediterranean, right off the coast for Israel,
Yes.
known as it's very deep, but it is the supposedly the largest oil supply in the entire world, right under the nose of the Jewish people in Israel. Do you think that could be placed any more perfectly for a God who,
If you're
the
going to
God of
bait a
Abraham?
hook for a big
Well,
fish,
if you, which is exactly which is, we get to Ezekiel here in a little bit. We'll talk about that baiting of the hook,
Yeah.
right? Because I believe that's it. But in Iran today, Iran controls about 20% of the oil on the face of the earth that is being distributed now. Well, y'all know that at the time of this recording, oil prices are already taking a big hit. They're in the high 70s and going to probably somewhere estimated between $100 and $110 a barrel. We'll see if it goes that high. It will. If it does, it'll only be for a short period of time, obviously. But the point is that you're speaking of Iran. Iran has a very large oil supply. I think it's the third largest in the world.
if you actually look at it, Iran's wealth, originated back in the 1500s from its trading ability, its ability to produce, and a part of the trade routes. But it was only so much that it could produce. There's only so many carpets you can make. There's only so much of this you can do. But after World War II, the world had a thirst to keep its nations going.
Sure.
With transportation, travel.
It was always known as
industry.
liquid gold, wasn't it?
It was always liquid gold and then now, quite frankly, why it became such an issue, because Iran, at the very beginning, most of the Middle East was relatively poor.
Right.
Bedouin, didn't change much. If you go in, I've got books in my library that have got photographs of the Middle East from the 1900s and the 1800s. And let me put it this way. If you were to compare it to Berlin or Paris or New York, even, and you'd say that these people are living like they've lived since the days of Jesus, it looked like.
Yeah.
But what really changed it is right after that. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring out was what really stirred the hornet's nest was in 1948.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When the United Nations unilaterally and against every Islamic nation decided that Israel was going to have its own country.
Well,
a tiny little slab.
It actually didn't come from.
No, it's been going a while, as far as
it was
Theodore Herzl,
well, from Herzl, and then obviously to Ben Gurion,
And the Balfour,
and the Balfour amendments that
Yeah.
took place, and all of those things ultimately led to it. But you're right, 1948 was a significant
May
date.
14th is when
1948.
1948, and the first Jewish war was May 15th, 1948.
Yeah, it was one day, and they were already at war.
And they were already at war. In fact, that's
But-
where they will push them into the sea.
But let's don't also forget the significance from a prophetic standpoint of 1948. If you go back to the book of Isaiah in the 66th chapter, the last book of Isaiah, or last chapter of Isaiah, excuse me, he tells us, he says, shall a nation be born in a day?
Yeah. Well, he
And-
showed them.
And it was done in one day. And what's also unique about that, after that declaration took place, it took 11 minutes from the time that was signed that Harry Truman wrote an acknowledgement of not only accepting but believing in the state of Israel. And that document I've actually seen. It's interesting because it's in Harry Truman's library in Independence, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there just to see that particular letter because it was interesting how quick it was. But the United States was the first to recognize Israel. Why? Because the United States is a Judeo-Christian nation. It always has been, and it always will be. We've allowed societies to do a lot of different things here, but you're right. The rebirth of Israel was significant, and Iran obviously has played a part in that ever since.
Iran, the entire Egypt, you have Syria, you had Jordan.
Right.
Jordan was basically a Christian country.
Right. Iraq.
Yeah. All of that is for the kings of the East. They've got they're going to make one trip. There's going to be some things that get dried up to make a trip over.
Right.
But getting ahead of myself. But
and you are. Hold that thought. We need to take a break.
Let's do that.
I blew that one. We'll be right back. Well, God bless you. We're back. This is Pastor Kurt, God Family Country Radio Show. In studio with me is a dear friend, Pat Coyle, and we're having the opportunity to talk about all of the events of this last week, what it represents. There's been a lot of misinformation that's gone out there. We're here to help clarify that and to be able to give you strong biblical support for these events. And we've been talking a little bit about the history again of Iran and understanding how they've kind of come to pass. And we've moved it forward for the sake of time to 1948 when we were talking about the rebirth of Israel.
Shuttle, not a just.
It was a
space shuttle view over it.
But it was a rocket shot.
Yeah.
And so with the rebirth of Israel, obviously everything changed in the Middle East.
In the entire Middle East.
That's right.
In the Middle East,
quite frankly, it changed the world. But what we're going to be focusing on is the Middle East.
At that particular time, after World War II, literally, the Russians got their atomic bomb.
Right.
The world was not a hospitable place for any of the nations at that point. We entered what we called a Cold War.
Right.
And one of the things about, in fact, a lot of Russia offloaded their Jews, if you will, into the new Jerusalem.
Yes.
They had a lot of the people literally considered that to be their homeland.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, the entire Middle East was set on flame. What are these people doing there?
Right.
Why are we allowing this? And they kept realizing, the first war they had lost. Then they had other wars, subsequent
It was
wars.
miracle after miracle that took place in the wars. Even if you go fast forward to 72, the Yom Kippur War.
Oh, just go to
the 6 Day War in 67.
And you can go back even to Egypt. You can start looking at all of those. Every nation had a crack to try to eliminate the Jew from that. They all believed they would do it. And if you look at this, it should have been a no-brainer and like the city of AI, I think, when when they said, It's a small place. We don't need all these people. Let's just take a little, couple
Yeah.
of grand. We'll make short work of this. And yet they still are here.
Right.
But the reality is why that becomes significant, because that got the entire Islamic world focused on one thing and one thing alone:
The total destruction.
wiping out the Jew. They had done a pretty rough, up until then, Muhammad, well, I shouldn't say Muhammad, we don't have a clue of what he actually said. But the realities are those people who were followers of the Quran,
Right.
always, if I can't kill you, then I'll just collect you. I'll collect taxes from you. I'll just turn you into you pay me to exist, so to speak.
Yeah, well, they are. Islam is instruments of death in many ways, and the idea of the taxation and all that kind of stuff, which was very real, is no longer the case today.
In fact,
Their desire is to do nothing
they
but to
didn't
wipe
need it
you out.
with oil.
Right. That's right.
That's what changed everything.
That's what changed. Right.
They didn't need to collect. Oh, you're not one of us. Well, you got to pay me my tax.
Right.
If you want to live in my land, I'm going to tax you to live in it.
Right.
But the realities is the whole focus now became, how do we get these people out of this land and return this back into it? You had the Suez Canal. They literally said, no one, because at that particular time, again, we were rebuilding, after World War II. We were beginning. The Great Generation was literally rebuilding America, getting American. Again, we look at things from our focus, but what was actually happening is it was all being done. Our roadway system, our entire. In other words, we became one of the world's largest consumers of oil and gas products. And what did we do? We bought from them. We literally overnight made them billionaires, the entire Middle East, because we'd set up remember, that was also part of our wartime, chest. To the victor belong the spoils. And so we literally began pumping millions at that time, which would be like billions today, of dollars for their oil, and it was reciprocal. These people now, that's how you have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That is why you have Dubai today. This money, this great transfer of wealth from, and we weren't stealing anything. We were just buying their oil, using it up, and as much as we can buy, we'll take it off your hands. All you guys got to do is just make sure that y'all don't mess with the yards. In other words, don't mess with the money supply.
Right.
But they had another problem now. The problem is that Islam was on fire to get rid of this people. We weren't going to be a part of it. We didn't want to be a part of that, to be honest with you. We stayed out we allowed Israel to fight its own battles, win, lose, or draw. In fact, many people in America, the day after they signed it, said, this ain't going to be long.
Right.
Yeah, well, this is symbolic almost, because, once they do what they're going to do, we knew they were going to do it. That's probably going to be end of this whole idea.
The policy of the United States was not in a good place and hasn't been for a long time. Our nation has always been a reflection of society, and most presidents that we have had have been a reflection on what society is. In other words, we know that in the book of Daniel, in the second chapter, we know that it's God that raises kings up and brings kings down.
Speaking of kings, let's talk about a couple of big kings that carved up Iran. Would have been Russia.
Yes.
And Britain.
Yeah.
And when people got tired.
And the only friend that they still have today is Russia.
China. But then God had already told us that the kings of the East.
Interesting how quiet Russia and China.
They've got their hands full.
Yeah.
They got their hands full. And the reality is God has made them. He has baited them into wars. Again, going back to Iran again, why this becomes an interesting little thing is that we have a part to play, both good and bad. What we ended up with when we decided to go in business with Iran and the Middle East, in oil production. Again, what else were we buying? Dates,
Right.
rugs. No, we were buying oil,
Right.
and that was what was making both of us rich.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't want anything to threaten that. Now, we recognized they had a problem with Israel, and that was their problem, as long as it wasn't. In fact, Yasser Arafat didn't come into power until he decided that the world's not paying attention to what we're trying to do here.
Oh, this is a great time to start telling a lie.
It was one of the things that they started doing.
It
was
was
the
the-
Suez
it was-
Canal
It
when
was
they
the,
shut that down.
it was the PLO, and this is where the lie begins about that Palestinians were of the Phoenicians at the time, not the Phoenicians, excuse me, the Philistines.
Philistines, yeah.
And
Well, the Romans gave it to
there
them.
there was no connection of that at all.
Well, I will say this: once the Romans had enough of the Jew,
right,
and they literally enslaved all of them,
and they
destroyed
changed,
the temple.
They destroyed the temple, and then they renamed it
They-
Palestine.
They gave the land to the Philistines.
Why did they name it Palestine?
Because they were looking to eradicate the Judea that was in our Bible.
The Philistines were the arch
enemies
enemy
always
of Israel.
And again, that was one of the things.
It was one of those, like, we've taken you out, but we're just
adding the insult to injury.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But Yasser Arafat took that and ran with it, and started rewriting history, which ultimately brought on the PLO, and we started seeing this movement of how somehow people starting to believe that the land of Israel belonged to the Palestinian people.
Let me put it this way:
how absurd!
If you went to one of the things about archaeology is you can't fake it.
You can't, and sometimes you can't.
When you start digging stuff up
to find
it wasn't. They didn't go dig down and put it there. It was there originally.
There. Right.
Now, here's an interesting thing, and this is where Islam has a big problem. A lot of the stories in Islam have no archaeology to back it up.
No.
In fact, one of the oldest stories in Islam is that in Mecca, guess what? When they've recently been digging up Mecca because they're building incredible. When you build big buildings, what do you have to do? You got to lay a foundation.
Right.
And if you're going to lay a foundation for a tall building, you got to dig down, right? They do this in Israel anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If they were looking, because according to Islam, Mecca was the beginning of all civilizations.
Yes, according to them.
It talks about
which is crazy.
Where Adam and Eve and all of this and all the prophets were, and they were buried standing up. Now, here's the problem. They've been excavating for the past 20 years
more than that.
More, I'm saying more, but as far as to really modernize, they've been watching Qatar and said, hey, I'd like, let's try that here. Because they got to come here to Mecca, right? Let's build some really. There's nothing there. There is no archaeology there. No. And in fact, Mecca was pretty much has the biggest problem is there's no water there.
Right.
The Zamzam well. Well, it's a desalination plant built by the Americans that provide the water. Again, why am I bringing this up? One of the things that God is showing to the world is the complete fallacy, the fantasy, I should say, of Islam. Your Quran has been made up. The stories in there don't ring true. They can't be verified. It is something, and in fact, you don't even know what Muhammad wrote because it was written hundreds of years afterwards.
That's
without correct. Any verification, and the earliest documents, you don't have them.
That's right.
And why is that important? Because for the first time in Islamic history, Islam can't be spread by the sword as effectively as it once could.
Right.
Now you have to rely on the strength of your arguments and the strength of your truth. And as many people today are hemorrhaging, they're saying, This is not true. This religion, this Allah, this Muhammad, these sayings, these ideas that have been placed into our parents' heads came out of thin air.
It's all a lie.
It's a lie. And so who am
And
I
of course,
following?
who is the
The
great
great
deceiver?
liar.
The great deceiver, we know, is Satan himself. And we know that, again, this is a false religion. We know that it is of Satan directly. And yet people have been deceived over it. And I'm talking in America as well here. Complete and total deception as recognizing it even as a religion. It's not a religion.
Isn't this Romans 1 all over again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is Romans 1.
If you won't accept the truth, he gives you over to your lies.
Well, they've exchanged the truth for a lie, and you stay with that long enough, God then turns you over to a debased mind, of which is exactly what we see today with Islam.
One advantage,
and there's no coming back, by the way, from that.
I will say this, is that Islam is being given the freedom now to look at its own documents, the same way Christians have had to do, especially around the 1800s.
Right.
And when we come back, we want to be able to talk about, because I believe what's happening is God's doing something
amazing. We're going to take this break. God bless you. We'll be right back. God bless you. God Family Country Radio Show right here on KTSA. And I'm Pastor Kurt. In studio with me is Pat Coyle. And I want to encourage you to go to Spotify, put in the God Family and Country Radio Show. It'll come right up to the top for you. You'll have the ability to go back if you missed the first segment of this show, the first hour. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to go back and catch it. We were giving a little bit of history about Islam itself and speaking specifically about Iran. I think everybody on the planet is well aware of the battle that's taking place. We're talking about some of the things that led up to that, and what is God's plan for all of this, and what is it? What is it? Because we know that we serve a God, Pat, that's in control of all things. We know that He's in sovereign control. This was maybe 3 months ago. This might have been something that was something that was not on very many people's radar that are paying attention. And all of a sudden, this has happened now, and it's happened for a reason. And God has reasons for everything that He allows to happen.
My ways are not your ways.
There you go.
And when we see things are happening, we try to look at the human aspects. So in other words, why did you, sir, do what you did?
Yes.
And why did you respond the way you did? Without actually standing back and said, God, He wouldn't have done that, and they wouldn't have done that had you not have done something. You're doing something. What are you doing? I tend to look at this in a view that what is God? He said He is wanting all men. He says, this gospel shall be preached to all nations, and then the end will come.
Yes.
And
the end of what?
The end of an age.
That's correct. The end of the Gentile age.
And so, yet Satan has had a deathlock on the Islamic world, which extends all over the globe, incidentally, that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. If Islam was true, and if the Quran is true, because the argument that they have is Jesus was not who He said He was. You've been lying. You didn't put Him to death. They've made bold historic claims that can be verified one way or the other. We have archaeology claims that we could verify. If you say this place was the birthplace of all humanity, then we should at least see their trash. I mean, we should be able to see what they did. They're the cleanest people on the universe because they didn't leave anything behind.
Right.
And now we want to be able to look at your scriptures that you're telling people are the very words that came down from heaven. Those words came down from heaven. Well, we should be able to put those to the test. God has never had a problem with His word. His word's been refined, He said. It's 7 times purer than gold. He allows everyone. You have doubts? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Take your best shot.
Right.
That has not been allowed in the Islamic world as long as there's been an Islamic world.
Right.
If you have doubts and you express them publicly, they have a method of dealing with doubt. It's called death.
Well, you've heard me say it before. Islam itself cannot coexist with Western
Can't
uh,
coexist with anything.
with
Can't even
Western
coexist with itself.
life. It's an absolute. Well, you're right. It
Mhm.
cannot, but it is not compatible with Western civilization. Period.
It's not true. Now, if you want to follow it, that's your business.
Yeah,
But it has an end because truth doesn't change.
that's correct.
Lies can change every single day, but truth stays true.
Yeah, well, I think you could hear somebody saying out there that almost 2 billion people, what 2.3 billion people on the planet are Islamic, and you're saying all these people are being led in the wrong direction. Yeah, I am telling you
I
that
can tell
because
you in the Christian world, you've got billions of people who follow a Jesus that will not save them.
yeah, 1.3 billion Catholics.
I'm
Unfortunately, Catholicism is a false religion as well. You they have a form of Christianity, but it is not biblical. And
well, Islam has a form of Christianity.
it has yes, it does. It does. They look at Abraham as an example
They
of
look at
being
Jesus. They
a
love
father.
Mary. They love.
Which is a true connection for them with Abraham because of Ishmael, who was born of Hagar, the servant. And if you'll read Genesis, and you'll see how God related to Ishmael. He never called him Abraham's son. He called him the lad.
Well, what did he say? He said, "Your what? Offer me your son, your only son."
Yes.
He didn't go say, "Hey, go get Ishmael
Well,
and let's
he
put
was
both of them."
speaking. Yeah, he was speaking of
Yeah,
Isaiah.
I,
I mean,
I,
excuse
I,
me.
I,
Costly, Kurt. I lost my brain for a second.
Isaac.
Isaac.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
and again,
And that was his only son.
that's the son that God had promised was not Ishmael.
Yeah.
Yet, the firstborn, according to the Islamic tradition, they said it all got turned around. This man was a supplanter. Isaac was the supplanter.
Yes.
He got what it should have gone to Ishmael. He had, yes, she was Hagar, different mountain, different region.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality is simply as this. This has been a story that's been playing out since the Garden of Eden, when God told your seed and her seed, he told Satan, there's two families on this planet, and they're going to be at enmity with you and with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to come and end that enmity. You may bruise their heel, but he will. The person I'm coming
And the
will
two
bruise
fam
your, will
let's tell
crush
them
your
who
head.
the two families are.
Family of God, family of Satan.
There you go.
There is no other. There are no other divisions on this planet. Ultimately, we're not divided by race. We're not divided by creeds and things like that. Although those things come into play. Jesus said, even in Israel at the time with the Pharisees, you of your father the devil.
Yes.
He was a murderer from the beginning, and you do. If you want to know what a God is like, look at how the followers go.
Yes.
And you look at who lies, and it's okay to lie. Well, there you go. You look at who it's okay to murder certain people. Well, there you go.
Right.
Jesus had a completely different gospel, one that even people who claim to be following him don't follow.
Right.
Jesus said, if you love me, you'll obey me.
Right.
And only those who obey him demonstrate the love. They're ready to go. The other ones, you can adopt whatever religious practices you want to do.
Right.
Say all the prayers you want. Have all the communions you want.
Right.
Get baptized until you're shriveled like a raisin.
Baptism doesn't save you. It's only the righteousness of God, as what Paul describes in the book of Romans. It is the righteousness of God that comes upon us, and it, of course, that we say the Holy Spirit.
Now, one of the advantages is that what the Islamic world, or a big chunk of it, will be able to do, will be able to at least hear the gospel and be able to publicly accept or reject it, God doesn't tell us.
Well, again, they're already hearing it. So in Iran, there are 91 million people. 91 million people inside Iran. By the way, Iran is about a little bit larger than the state of Texas twice. Put two states of Texas in there. It's just a little bit bigger than that. So 91 million people there in Iran. 3.5 million, of which we know are Christian.
That's
That are
almost nothing.
it has it not always been a remnant?
It's always been that way,
It's
and yet God is always going to bring His word to light.
yes, of
And
course.
this people had been, in fact, the internet. If you go into the internet, if there are certain things you can't look up, you can't find. They actively suppress. We talk about in Romans the suppression. Not only do is it just the oppressive nature of the regime.
Hmm.
There are lots of oppressive regimes, but as these regimes begin to topple, one of the things is light has been able to go in there. God
Right.
is still calling his people,
Yes.
and yet there are still people to be called. And one of the things that God is doing, I believe, and it's happening in Britain too.
We'll talk more about that when we come back.
Yeah.
God, Family, Country Radio Show. God bless you. We'll be right back. God bless you. God, Family, Country Radio Show. And we've been talking about all the events of Iran, gave you a little bit of history on it. And Pat, I'm Pastor Kurt, by the way, Pat Coyle in studio. And we want to give you a little bit more current of what's going on. You know, Pat, we were getting ready to jump off on something, and I just had this one thing I wanted to talk about. Presidents in the United States matter. Islam, and specifically Iran under the Islamic regime, which will topple extremely quick here. Believe that the United States is the big Satan, and that Israel is the little Satan. And their ultimate plan was to destroy the United States. That's why the United States had to react as quickly as it could, because with their missile systems and their nuclear capabilities, they had enough nuclear material for, I believe it's 11 bombs. We thought it was 9, then it was 10, but it looks like it was 11 bombs that they had the ability to fire off, of which they would have done to not only destroy Israel, but to destroy the United States. We have to understand that we have enemies out there that want to destroy us. And, you know, presidents, Pat, always matter.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at everything that resulted in the Shahs being dethroned out of Iran, and seeing this regime come into place, you got to look at the Carter years and seeing how weak Jimmy Carter was as a president. And then if you look at each president that's come along since, they've been reluctant to do anything. Even Ronald Reagan, who I absolutely loved, wouldn't respond to any sort of a regime change. Now, there's been a lot of history since those days to where we are today, and a lot more technology.
Well,
today.
we have a problem with because we have been involved in regime changes.
Well, yes.
In fact, let's talk around. And
this is something most people are we not responsible for even the Shah being in?
I'll say this: for a country who goes to war to make the world safe for what? Democracy?
Democracy, right.
Well, let's take Iran. Now, if you have to look at the era too. Remember, we talked a little bit about when they tried to close the Suez Canal to traffic. That's one of the first things that the world said, and the United States strongly said, no, you're not going to do that.
No, you're talking about in the 80s.
No, I'm talking about back in the 50s.
Oh, back in the early 50s. Okay.
The early 50s.
Yes.
Where they were trying to exert some type of braking system on the West.
Yes.
They recognized things are changing. Remember, the entire Islamic world was refocused now on Israel, getting rid of Israel. but we still sold. And what the money that they were getting, now they were trying to exert an embargo and and a closing of the Suez Canal. Well, that didn't go over very well.
Right.
However, one of the things that did change things a little bit was Iran decided they were going to have elections. Okay, that sounds great. Let's see who you pick. Unfortunately, they the people that the Iranian public picked was not very American. They more sided with what was going on in that area.
Right.
And so American and Britain, it wasn't just us alone.
Right.
Said, we're going to pick again. We're going to, we normally don't like kings.
Right.
But in this particular case, you've made a mistake, and we're going to fix it for you. Don't worry. We're going to take the Shah, which is kind of a Persian for king.
Yes.
And we're going to install him over the guy you elected.
Right.
This was done, and the Iranian people never forgot that.
Right.
Now, the Shah, quite frankly, and keep in mind, this is 1953.
Yes.
This was all cooked up by M16 and the CIA. The American public would never have had anything to do with that.
No, and they had no information like we have today.
We were still a Leave It to Beaver nation.
Right.
And the realities is, they made it sound like it's all their idea.
Mm-hmm.
That the people wanted the Shah. They wanted these people back in power, and we're going to give them what they want. Because we knew the Shah would do what we wanted. Mm-hmm. And they would help. We would have a base there, so to speak, which is what we had.
Right.
And we westernized. In fact, one of the things that the Shah did was he kind of opened it up for all this newfound wealth.
It was at that point a very metropolitan type environment.
It rivaled Paris. It rivaled New York. Mm-hmm. It rivaled Berlin. Berlin was kind of a wreck at that point. If you think
about Middle Eastern countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia today, they are very metropolitan in many ways, but Iran was way ahead of them.
They were the jet set had all of Iran, Tehran. Those were the go-to places for the jet setters.
Yes,
and it was wide open then. You can look at you can go online and said Iran in the 50s, Iran in the 60s. And you began to look and you see, and in fact, it really got decadent. And the Shah was one of the reasons why it got so decadent.
Yes.
This man was spending the equivalent of billions of dollars just on nonsense. Now, Iran was never a rich country as far as it didn't trickle down. Let me just put it to you that way.
Mm-hmm.
And they had poor people, they had suffering people, and and those people were watching these ultra wealthy, they were basically slaves to the West now.
Yes.
And that created this internal dialogue. And the Islamic revolution occurred. Why Khomeini became popular is because they had adopted all of the poisonous ideas of the West,
right?
The liberation ideas of sexual liberation, women's liberation.
This was about bringing the goats into the pen, into the goat pen.
Again, we didn't mind that.
Them up.
Yeah, we didn't mind that as long as they were giving us what we wanted, and they were keeping our ideas. What ultimately from 53 to 79.
Yeah, there was mini skirts in Iran.
Rock and roll.
It had everything going for it. Right?
If you went all over France and
imagine the freedoms and stuff that they had at that particular time,
and they abused those freedoms the same way we've abused ours.
Have we not? Exactly. What's the difference on that one?
So in essence, the Iranian people, who were a very family-oriented, Islamic, uh, they recognize this is evil. That's how we became the great Satan.
Yes.
Is because we were bringing all of the worst aspects of America
Of Islam.
and Islam said you can't do any of that.
That's
They're
correct.
drinking, they're drugging, they're naked,
Right.
they're it's we got to cover things up. Well, it's like once you start turning up, now they decided we got to clamp down. And they did that in 79.
Yes.
That's when they installed we want the Ayatollah, we want the Shah out of here.
Mhm.
This guy has been raping us. He's been taking our money. They literally, when he left with literally billions, gold and diamonds and all of that.
But little did the Iranian people know what was about to happen to them as a result.
Again, be careful what you ask for.
Be careful what you ask for, because you want to talk about a shift and radicalization. I mean, it was hardcore Islam from that point forward.
That's when the billions of dollars that were being squandered by the Shah started being refunneled to what Islam's focus was.
Yes.
Getting rid of the Jew.
Yes.
And that's when Islam, and not just Islam, but that is when Iran, well, keep in mind, it wasn't that much farther out after the 79 that they decided to go to war with each other, the Sunnis and the Shiites.
That's right.
The Iran-Iraq war, which almost decimated both countries.
Right.
Until one of them finally said, okay, you have Saddam Hussein over on one side. You have Ayatollah Khomeini, both claiming the same God, but both at each other's, but they finally said enough.
Yeah, there are strategic differences between Shiite and Sunnis. However, they will come together for a common cause. Even though they had their battles, those two sects of Islam will come together for the ultimate purpose of Allah, and then they'll go right back. Then they'll go right back to killing each other.
Let's just put it this way: they both have one idea about when it comes to the subject. On a lot of subjects, they're death blows, but on one subject, they're 100% line locked.
Right.
And that's the death and the extinction of the
Jews and America.
Only because America is siding with the Jews. They'll side with, if we sided with them, they'd side with us. But that's part of the issue, is that where we're at today is God is changing the guard. And he's not changing it because, those poor people have been under this. Because he is going to bring his word into that area to accomplish whatever it accomplishes.
Yes.
And it may only be a remnant, and that's okay too. It's in that God's word's still going on in China. God's word is still going on all throughout the world. Doesn't matter where you try to stop it. Right. In fact, the more you try to stop it, the more it seems to spread.
Yes.
And God's always been interested in his people. And that's what he's bringing there. And so what we're looking at today is there are some prophetic things to this that God has said God has told us what his end goal is and how he's going to accomplish it in certain things. There's some things that we want to look at, like what's going on in Syria. Yeah. There's a city in Syria that God has made a prediction that
Damascus.
And in fact, if you mess with Damascus, you're going to have a real problem with the UN.
Yeah.
Because that is a protected global historic site. So if you mess with that, you're messing with everybody, is the way they look at it.
Yeah, you go back to Isaiah, the 6th.
Ezekiel and Isaiah,
yes, it says that in the last days that Damascus would become a heap of ruins. Now, Damascus could easily be described as the oldest.
It is one of the oldest cities on the planet,
on the entire planet, and yet it will become a heap of ruins. The Bible tells us.
Everybody knows about the Tower of Babel
Yes.
and Babylon and the
Right.
Hanging Gardens of Babylon
Right.
and all of that. Those are cities of antiquity that the world has recognized.
Hmm.
We have a stake. That is like the cradle,
Right. We've been giving you folks a lot of different information about why we are where we're at here today. But God has a plan. He's had it from the very beginning. That plan is being followed out under His sovereign control, exactly as He has planned it. God is not up in heaven sucking down a Maalox bottle trying to figure out how Trump and Netanyahu started this war. He's known it before the foundations of the world ever began,
That's right.
and there is purpose in what is taking place, and we will see that purpose unfold from a biblical
In
standpoint.
fact, we're seeing him aligning people together that normally would never align together.
Absolute truth. And so we want to encourage you to go back to your Bible and take a look at it. When we come back, we're going to be looking at Matthew 24,
Well, yeah,
which
and
will
some
give us a great
Ezekiel
some
38 and
Ezekiel
Daniel.
38 and 39. And we're going to give you some biblical proof of the role that Iran plays in all of this, and Israel and the United States.
He's
We'll do
moving
that.
the chessboard.
Absolutely.
Fast.
God Family Country Radio Show, right here with Pastor Kurt and Pat Coyle. God bless you. We'll be right back. God bless you. God Family Country Radio Show. I'm Pastor Kurt. In studio with me is Pat Coyle. We're talking about Iran specifically. A little bit of the history that we gave you. There's a whole lot more,
way
and we
more.
jumped way through. It would have been a 10-hour show if we had started from the beginning. But we wanted to give you the very best snapshot of how Iran has been moving through history and the role it plays from a biblical standpoint, and why these things are happening to this Islamic regime, not the Persian people. The idea is to set the Persian people free. And last segment, we were talking about the westernization under the Shah of Iran, and
Well, our version of
of what took place, and ultimately, again, the regime taking over,
which led
which led to the Islamic regime. Thank you. Of ultimately in 1979, and then moving forward. And of course, they have been murderers and thugs, not only of their own people, but to the Jewish people as well as the United States. This has been a battle, and I started to talk about it for a minute. We sort of shifted gears. This is where presidents matter. The power and the strength of presidents, from Jimmy Carter all the way through to Donald Trump, of where we see today. God has been in the process of constantly raising kings up and bringing kings down. Yes, God looks at it in terms of presidents of nations as being the same thing as a king, not in the sense of what the left looks at it today as being a king. But ultimately, in the process of raising them up and bringing them down, it's God who's ultimately in control, leading the world exactly to the plan that He determined before the foundations of the world. Having said that, when you have a strong president today, like we have in Donald Trump, we're able to accomplish things that were not able to be accomplished by other presidents. And he has basically set, to a certain extent, the Persian people, and setting them up ultimately that they'll make decisions for their own destiny. Most of Persians are not Islamic. However, there are many Persians that are, but for the most part, if you're looking at the entire country of 91 million plus people, you're talking about 3.5 of them that are actually Christians, believers in Jesus Christ. And then you have the Persian people that just want to be left alone, and they want to return back to their Western lifestyle that they had under the Shah.
You know, the world there was no way to be able to, predict accurately how God has done everything. you look at one of the strongest catalysts for internal change and the ability has been the ability to communicate with one. In communication, in Daniel, the last verse of Daniel, he said travel would increase and the ability to, be able to communicate
Right.
would that's always been the hard part.
Hmm.
We have been, in essence, separated by distance, and we've always tried to close that distance by, everything from smoke
Right.
signals. As technology is now, we have the ability that in all of human history,
Hmm.
if an event is occurring, just like we can wake up and experience the very event, not the same way, but experience that event
Hmm.
as it's going on in real time, uh, literally on our telephones,
Right.
which are on our hips, which before that type of connectivity has never, ever been possible on this planet, except in the age in which we live. And
Right.
that's all come about to play a part to create this drive. One of the things about American, we haven't had many assassinations in this country. The changing of our guard usually occurs at the ballot box in a relatively, and it is the marvel. And quite
We've had
frankly,
lots of attempts, that's for sure.
well, we've had, and again, but by and large, most democracies don't make it very long. Greece proposed a democracy, but it was not like what we have here. In fact, we
Right.
don't have a democracy in America. We have a republic.
Right. That's right.
But we use the people to vote the Democrat to vote in,
That's correct.
but our laws are set. We agree to abide by them or we go somewhere else.
Right.
But the reality is that presidents are instrumental in having in small bursts pushing things forward. But by nature, we have limited the pushing power to
Uh,
about 4 years, 2 terms, and now what we're doing is working, and we also revolve around the fickle nature of
and
people.
that change took place around Roosevelt, the time of
Yeah,
Roosevelt. He was actually a 4-term, 4-year, 4-year
even George
staged term.
Washington refused
Right,
a
and
kingship, and
that's why there was a constitutional change to that
that's
of
why
no
we have
more than two
amendments.
2 years of amendment that went through. So, but the point is that uh, each president that we've had truly was elected by God for the very purpose of bringing His plan further along. This is what God has always done. Yes, we think we have elections. Yes, we're voting, but the voting that we do as a people across the nation ultimately is exactly where God wanted those individuals to go. And again, He raises kings up, He brings kings down. So let's talk about from the time that we have left on the show, from a biblical
Where are
standpoint
we going?
of where we go and how does Iran play a part.
It's not a bad way to go. Again, the good news is that God is in absolute positive control, not a molecule.
Hmm.
If the hairs on your head are numbered and a bird can't fall without God being involved,
Right.
then you know He's got this thing wired so tight it can't change.
That's
It's not
correct.
going to change. Now, He's already told us what He is going to do. His ultimate goal is that there'll be a new heavens and a new earth and a new Jerusalem
Yes.
that the vast majority of humanity are not going to be a part of, or
That's
not
correct.
going to like the part that they get.
Right.
But that's part of the good news. We've got, if you don't like, you can change it right now.
That's correct.
But what does God say? Because He is focused, He has said He has put His name in one spot on the universe.
Hmm.
It's all on Jerusalem. If I was to ask you if you were to go around the world and said, what's the most important city on this planet? You would get all types of names.
Oh, yeah.
All you'd
Right.
get, Washington, the Kremlin, the this, the that, this. They all have a part to play in this.
Right.
But God says, I'm putting my name on one city, and that city is Jerusalem.
That's right.
I'm
Everything
going
is
to
centered from
bring,
Jerusalem.
I am going to bring all these nations, every nation on the face of the planet at that particular time. I'm going to bring them all to this one city, and I'm going to dispose of them all.
Well, the book of Joel, the third chapter of the book of Joel, says very clearly that God is going to gather all nations, and He's going to bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat,
Yeah.
where He will enter into judgment with them there on account of His people, His heritage Israel, whom they have scattered amongst the nations.
Divided the land.
And they have also divided up my land, he says.
It didn't even belong to the Jews.
Well, no, it's his land.
It's his land because he throws them out. What did he do? He took them out of Babylon and then put them back in Babylon.
That's
then he
right.
took them back out again.
But the thing of it is, what you're talking about when we're really truly talking about the time, the focus is going to be on two areas. It's going to be on Jerusalem in Israel, and Jerusalem proper, and then of course Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet will all come from Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people say, "What do you mean Babylon? Babylon doesn't exist." Babylon, we're talking about a region that you can tell that is absolute evil, and this is more in the southern area of Iraq. And I've mentioned this before, but if you have a chance to talk to those soldiers that were fighting in the Iraq War, they'll tell you that in those regions, in those southern regions, there were things that were going on, things that they felt that were just absolutely evil.
I'll just say is that there is just like there's a symbolic Jerusalem.
Yes.
There's a symbolic Babylon.
Absolutely.
Babylon, the spirit of Babylon exists here in the United States.
The only thing is,
it exists everywhere.
It does. But the symbolic Jerusalem is the Jerusalem we see today.
Yeah, there'll be coming a new Jerusalem.
There will be.
Yeah.
But we're talking about on this side.
There's one point in the planet in which God has put his name, and it's got an address.
Yes.
You can go there.
Yes.
And you can go to Babylon, but you're not going to like what you see.
And we got to take this break. This is the God Family Country Radio Show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. God bless you. This is the God Family Country Radio Show right here on KTSA. And I'm Pastor Kurt. In studio with me is Pat Coyle. And we have been talking about Iran. And now we're taking this last segment here and speaking of what should we look forward to in the future.
Iran has a part to play.
From a biblical prophecy standpoint.
The whole globe is going to take part in this.
That's correct.
But there are some things that have yet to be done that God has said that almost sound crazy. As if I was to say New York is be wiped out. Mm-hmm. Or Washington, D.C., we would say they may take a hit. We saw 9/11, but wiped out. What does that mean? In other words, never to be rebuilt. Well, one is a prophecy that God said, Damascus, I'm going to destroy Damascus, one of the oldest cities on this planet,
mm-hmm.
and it will never be inhabited again.
Right. It will
ever be
inhabited. Bible calls it in Isaiah 17. It will
a haunt.
It will be. It will come nothing but ruins.
Yeah.
Not one stone upon another, if you will. It is
probably as wild as what Jesus said in the on
That's
Matthew
exactly
24.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, what? Not one stone. Wait a minute. It took 40 years to build this temple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going to destroy it in a day.
Pat's talking about here in what Jesus was talking, Matthew 24, of which was the destruction of the second temple in 70 AD.
And so, that's one big event. Mm-hmm. When you see that, you are at you got problems.
Yes.
There's another event, and this is Ezekiel, in chapters 38 and 39.
By the way, the Bible in Isaiah 17 also describes who it is that's going to destroy Damascus. It tells us it'll be the Jewish people.
There we go. Now, you could imagine what kind of firestorm that's going to set off on the globe.
Well, yeah, of course but anything.
Because you just ruined a UN protected site.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, we'll see how that works.
Yes. But it is. From a prophecy standpoint, we're going to see an awful lot happening. Now, a lot of people right now are looking at Ezekiel 38 and 39. And I wanted to spend a couple minutes and talk about this because it's a very real event. It's a futuristic event of things that are going to take place. And we know that Iran is going to play a part on it because Ezekiel described the
Persian.
Persia.
They said by name, Persia.
Right. He mentioned it by name.
In fact, that whole chapter gives a list of names to it.
Mm-hmm.
But he groups them together as Gog and Magog.
That's correct.
And those two terms, people have been trying to scratch. Oh, who are they? They're the entire, what we would say, these are the people who are united against God.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you're from. You are united against God. And it seems that there's similarities.
Well, Magog is a place.
Well, it is.
Gog is a person.
Well, I will say this, is that as when we look at prophecy,
mm-hmm.
The thing that's being presented isn't the thing that you should be looking for. It's a representation of something far bigger.
Yes.
And, one of the things that it is a coming together of different peoples who would normally be enemies. And yet they'll come together for a single purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm going to bring them from the east. He actually tells us the alliances that have never been. These are enemies.
Libya. He mentions, we know it'll be Russia from Magog.
Turkey, again, Sudan, Libya.
Yeah.
And let me put it to you this way. People have deep memories. Iran remembers what Russia did to them.
Yes.
It remembers what China has done.
Yeah.
But yet, for some reason, those things won't matter when God decides to assemble these kings, if you will, from the east. And where are they going? They're going one place. They're going to do one thing in one city on this planet.
That's right.
Now, what's interesting is that, as you brought up, if the Jew destroys this, would that not be a perfect precursor for the rest of the world to say, enough's enough with you people? But there will be a person that will step in and make some peace for a while.
Well,
Daniel 7.
Daniel 7, yes. And so to give people a perspective of the time period, because a lot of people are thinking that Ezekiel 38 and 39 could happen at any moment. And that's actually not true at all.
There are things probably
that you have to, there's only two places that Gog and Magog are mentioned. One is in Ezekiel 38, and the second is in the book of Revelation in the 20th chapter. The event of Gog Magog takes place after the 1,000-year millennial reign.
I will say is that there is a period of time in which God, what I would like to do is focus on, again, God is going to create a time of rest for the land,
mm-hmm.
a Sabbath, so to speak.
Right.
And if the clock is right and 6,000 years is clicking down, there'll be a Sabbath rest for the world in which Satan is. But up until that day, what I'd like to, we'll focus in on. Again, we'll be here for weeks.
Yeah.
But the reality is that some big events that are going to take place that we could be looking at is really when you start seeing these nations that don't really seem to have a lot in common, and seem to be at each other's throats, beginning to make. Well, what did we see? We recently saw where you had the people wanting to create an alternative currency to the United States currency. In which it would be gold back, and it'd be China and the BRIC nations is what they called them. Now, can you imagine any of these nations coming together to create their own economy simply because they didn't like the other economy?
Right. And yet everything that we have today, as it stands today, as of this recording, is still based upon the dollar.
Could we not say that's in one form of a Gog and a Magog?
Yeah.
It's economic Gog and Magog. You've got the entire globe, which is on a dollar system. In fact, most of the large trillion-dollar funds are traded within, then there's currency funds, I understand. But ultimately, there's going to be a currency that everyone adopts, that if you don't adopt it, you're not going to be able to buy or sell.
Right.
Now, who would ever thought that would have occurred? That doesn't sound too far-fetched now, does it?
No, it doesn't. if we're going to look at Iran,
we're looking at Revelation 17 and 18.
Yes, right. And there's a whole lot that's going to take place. The peace that Pat and I pray that we can give you is that that there is things that God is going to do over a period of time. And I say it all the time, we are racing towards the end of days. And that part is absolutely true. And at the same time, to bring you a peace, that understanding that God is sovereignly control over all things, that does bring a peace if you're a believer. If you're not a believer, then God help you.
One of the things I would bring up is, you're absolutely right. There is no peace for the wicked.
There is none.
And we just have to accept that, But God has doing things, all things.
Yes.
And it reminds me of when Paul was stuck in Athens.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he was stuck there, but he was waiting for his friends to go other places.
Right.
But while he was there, he was given an opportunity by the philosophers of that era.
Giving him a chance to,
hey, everyone
tell us what you know.
He said, we're interested in what you got to say. You seem to be bringing about new gods. And he said, it's not a new God. You guys actually got him up on a statue.
Right. There's just no name underneath.
You just don't know who he is. Now, he's the one who sent me here.
Right.
And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because he tells the whole story of humanity in as concise a package as you can get. And I can't tell it any better than what he had done. In fact,
it's in the book of Acts.
The book of Acts, I'm in the 17th chapter. And he said, now he's given a shot. Mm-hmm. Paul stood, and I'm in verse 22. Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus, and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore, the one and he's got that capital, the one, whom you worship without knowing. And that reminds me of the woman at the well. You worship what you don't know, but we worship what we do. Salvation is of the Jews.
Right. By the way, she was the first one to know
that he was the Christ.
That he was the Christ.
He's the only one he personally told her.
That's correct.
But God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temple made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling. Have we not been talking about human history?
That's exactly right.
And here's why. Verse 27. So that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. He's not trying to play hard to get.
Right.
For in him we live and move and have our being, as often some of your own poets have said, we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold, silver, or stone, or something shaped by the art and man's devising. Is that not what Islam,
right?
Pick a religion. People come up with these ideas about God, but without knowledge about the God.
Paganism, moralism, Nomianism.
Yeah, they're all fall into some category.
They or Judaism.
But God has revealed himself, and he makes those who seek him will find him. Truly, and I'm going on to verse 30 here. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked. There's forgiveness. But now he commands all men everywhere to repent. You have to turn away from that nonsense to the true God. Because here's why. He has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man he has ordained. He has given us assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead, who is the only one that we know that's ever existed on this planet. This is what God is rolling everything down. He is winding all of humanity down to a point because his son is going to have a kingdom. There is going to be a day of reckoning for each one of us.
Yes.
And regardless of where you were at, he's calling you now to turn away from that and to turn toward the one true God. And the only way you're going to find that is in the scriptures. Not every scripture, but only in the scripture that he has provided through his apostles.
Let me clarify even more. The only way you're going to be able to find it is if you have the ears to hear and the eyes to see. It's God given. If God is calling you to search the scriptures, you will find everything that we just told you to be absolutely true.
If you are, if what we're saying makes sense, and you are worried, and you should be, you've got a reason to be worried. If you haven't made things right between you and God, you've got problems that you don't even know you've got right now.
Yeah, and there's two types of people that are listening to the show. One, non-believers looking at it, scoffing at it, and saying everything that we said is just nonsense. And then there are others that are paying attention, and those that are paying attention and getting this, understanding how close we are to the end, is a desire in their heart to do that. That desire is already telling me that's in you, that God is already doing a work in you. In other words, the Holy Spirit is there. He's guiding you, and he's given you the ears to hear so that when you pick up your Bible and you start reading, you understand and know who the Messiah truly is.
You know, we've been talking about events that have that were foretold millennia ago,
5,000 plus years ago.
God tells you, I tell you the end from the beginning so that you'll know that I am he. Yeah. Now, you want to believe what you want to believe. You want to believe that everything is happening as it happens and you couldn't predict it. Yeah. Well, that's up to you. You know, that tells me. But the fact that we are able to tell you what has happened, what's going to happen, and what's coming up ahead is proof positive that there is a God in this universe that you are going to have to face.
You're right.
You better be ready for it.
That's exactly right. This is the God Family and Country Radio Show. Tell your friends and family about it, and have them hit the follow button on Spotify. It'll be awesome for you to get the updates from you. We've enjoyed being with you tonight. Give us your comments about the show. God bless you, and have a great week.